When a hardworking mother from Myrtle Beach marries a charismatic airman from the nearby base, she has no idea how quickly he will work to break down her confidence, self-esteem, and ultimately end her life. Another adventurous, fun-loving, and independent North Carolina native is set up on a blind date, and they soon start a life together in South Carolina. But when she unexpectedly goes missing and her fiancé doesn't want to report her missing, their love story will end in a way that no one ever imagined. There is much to love about North and South Carolina, but the two states have also had their fair share of violent and senseless crimes over the years. From murders on the Blue Ridge Parkway, in the heart of big cities or sleepy college towns, and along the coastal waters, some of these stories may be new to you. Some may have happened in your town. Some may involve people that are still missing to this day. But all will leave you remembering to always be vigilant about the people you meet and the places you go. I'm Renee Robertson. Please join me for Missing in the Carolinas. Episode 116, Mary Ann Willis and Dara Watson, Two Stories of Domestic Violence. October is the designated month for bringing awareness to domestic violence, but it's a topic I believe we should be talking about year-round, as it still remains a prevalent issue in our society. I've discussed several cases tied to domestic violence in this podcast, including Nancy Cooper from episode 18, Missing Runners in North Carolina, Patty Jo Pulley from episode 45, Across State Lines, Mary Ann and Elaine Buskowski in episode 48, Two Wives, Two Deaths, and Shelby Wilkie from episode 85. Many other missing persons cases likely have ties to domestic violence, but just don't have the solid evidence yet to back that up. On January 4th, 1993, 30-year-old Mary Ann Willis was in the Legal Affairs Office at the Myrtle Beach Air Force Base in South Carolina. She was there waiting to testify in a military hearing that her husband, Jeremy J.J. Willis, had burned her with a propane torch and choked her on two separate incidents in August of 1992. Although he was under direct orders to stay away from his wife, J.J. Willis entered the office anyway. Wearing his uniform, he shot his wife twice in the chest and head with 9 other people present before fleeing the base in a military truck. Mary Ann was pronounced dead a short time later at the Grand Strand General Hospital. From there, J.J. drove an Air Force-owned truck through the woods for about a mile before crashing through a fence and parking the vehicle behind a church. Then, he got into one of the 2 rental cars he had rented over that weekend and left at that location. Police distributed flyers with a description of the 23-year-old. He was 5 feet 10 inches tall, 162 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. They believed he was driving a white 4-door Plymouth Acclaim with a North Carolina license tag and a Thrifty rental car sticker on the bumper. Originally from southern Ohio, JJ was serving as a grounds technician on the Myrtle Beach Air Force Base at the time of the murder. He'd been in the Army before transferring to the Air Force in June of 1988. With the help of the U.S. Marshal Service, local police also distributed posters to departments all across the country. The State Law Enforcement Division stated they could find no record of J.J. purchasing the murder weapon, a 9mm pistol. The Air Force Base said they also didn't have any records of J.J. owning such a gun, and personnel were required to register guns if they lived on base. J.J. had been living on the base since the previous August. His case was soon turned over to the Myrtle Beach Police Department because the Air Force Base did not believe J.J. was still in the area, and they needed additional assistance to help track him down. Mary Ann Willis had first been married to an airman at the Myrtle Beach Air Force Base, Tommy Raffia. They had their son together, and she helped support the family by working as a waitress at an establishment called the Good Times Restaurant in Surfside Beach, and then Damon's The Place for Ribs over in Litchfield Beach. Her manager, Jan Moore, said she got along well with the other staff and customers and also sometimes worked behind the bar. But when Raffia received orders to go to Korea, Mary Ann hesitated. She told her husband she didn't want to go with him, and they separated in 1991. She hadn't been dating Jeremy J.J. Willis, who was 6 years her junior, long when she took a vacation in March of 1992 and came back married. 2 weeks after the wedding, she quit her job. When the manager called her to talk about it, Mary Ann said her new husband didn't want her working around other men. She wasn't even allowed to go back and pick up her final paycheck. Her manager soon heard through the grapevine that JJ wasn't allowing Mary Ann to drive her own car anymore either. Moore didn't know how bad things had gotten until she got a visit from an officer from the Myrtle Beach Air Force Base. He asked what she knew about the couple's relationship and told her Mary Ann Willis claimed JJ had set the propane tank on fire near her during an argument. Lorna Roselle lived next door to Mary Ann and JJ in the Ammons Mobile Home Park off SC 544. She grew closer to the young woman after the accident where JJ allegedly lit a match to a propane tank inside the couple's trailer, and Mary Ann's legs were severely burned. At the time, Roselle believed the burns were the result of an accident, especially because JJ played the role of doting and concerned husband to Mary Ann afterwards. But on August 27, 1992, the first night Mary Ann was back at home after her hospital stay, Roselle was startled to hear screams coming from their next-door neighbors. She and her boyfriend, Junior Purcell, saw JJ strangling Mary Ann, while her 6-year-old son Tommy struggled to get his stepfather to release his grip. Mary Ann later told her friend that she had gone along with JJ's story about the propane lighter being an accident because she was worried about her son staying with her husband while she recovered. She wanted to make sure her child was safe before she alerted the authorities. Roselle later said JJ did what a lot of abusers do and turned himself into a victim. He told her he couldn't understand why his wife had pressed charges against him, claiming that he really loved her. Roselle told him, "JJ, you can't just burn somebody." After the strangling incident, Mary Ann took her son and headed back to Rhode Island, where she had family members. She wrote to Roselle, telling her that she was doing better with the support of her family. She explained that her husband was not facing any domestic violence charges with the local police, and they had dropped the investigation into the burning incident because there were no witnesses. Air Force officials told the media that JJ had become a model airman after he turned himself into his squadron commanders on August 28, 1992. He was given orders to stay on base and then sent to alcohol rehabilitation counseling at Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas on September 25th. He returned on November 6th and again was given written orders that required him to stay on base. He was supposed to check with military police throughout each day and have an escort anytime he traveled off base. He also attended Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. He passed a series of mental health tests. He gave no one on the base any indication of what he was planning. After the murder, one of JJ's aunts was interviewed by the Myrtle Beach Sun News. She said she preferred not to use her name in the article, and pointed out that JJ Willis had always been a mild-mannered young man who didn't even like to see an animal hurt or in pain. Administrators at his former high school in Ironton, Ohio, said he was a run-of-the-mill student, but respectful. He had run on the track team and played football, although he wasn't a starter for the team. Because he lived in an area in Ohio where jobs were scarce, he planned early on to join the military after graduation for job security. He had served in the Persian Gulf War. His aunt said she could think of no other reason for JJ to kill his wife in cold blood other than he just snapped. The day after the shooting, a rental car JJ was suspected to be driving was spotted in the parking lot of a townhouse in Murrells Inlet. A witness said he saw a man matching JJ's description loitering near the mailboxes. He'd also rented a motel room in Murrells Inlet. JJ had gone to 2 different rental car agencies to rent vehicles prior to the shooting. One, Thrifty Rental, and the other was Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Employees said the man seemed calm and discussed needing a car to take a trip home to Ohio. They had no idea he was picking up a getaway car before planning to murder his wife. Investigators later determined that in the days after Mary Ann was murdered, JJ boarded a bus in Columbia, South Carolina. He then took another bus to Ashland, Kentucky, which was near his hometown in Ohio. From there, they weren't sure what his movements were until he arrived in the border town of Brownsville, Texas, around January 13th. On January 19th, he drove the white Plymouth Acclaim he had rented to a parking lot near a bridge that led from Brownsville into Mexico. He had swapped out the license plate from North Carolina to Louisiana. When local police patrolled the lot, which was often used by people stashing stolen cars, they spotted the Acclaim and impounded it. When JJ returned from Mexico and found the car missing, he called the Brownsville police station to inquire about it. The officer who took his call said he was going to transfer JJ to a supervisor, and he quickly hung up. He called back later that afternoon and Sergeant Willie Kingsbury answered the call. He offered to send a police car to wherever JJ was so he could get to the police station to pick up the car. JJ declined, saying he would take a cab. Police interviewed local cab drivers and found one that had seen JJ. They determined he was staying at a nearby Motel 6. They staked it out, and on January 19th, they saw him get into a cab and head to a nearby topless nightclub. They arrested him in the parking lot. He had a 9mm pistol with him, but he did not resist the arrest. After his capture, JJ frankly discussed his time on the run and the murder in front of reporters while at the detention center in Texas. He said, "I was going to get away, but the Texas Rangers and the FBI got damn lucky. 3 more days, I would have been gone." He continued to deny the domestic violence charges against him, but admitted to the murder, saying, "I know what I did was wrong. It was morally and humanely wrong. But did you ever hear that song, 'I used to love her, but I had to kill her' by Guns N' Roses? It's like that. I loved her so much. She would leave me. I lost everything. My career. It was only a matter of time before I lost that." An article that ran in the same issue announcing JJ's capture featured the title, "Victim at Base Lived and Died by the System." It quoted several area experts who said the system cannot protect wives from husbands determined to kill them. A clinical psychologist with the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston at the time, Dr. Connie Best, said, "It's very hard to predict future behavior, but the biggest predictor of future behavior is past behavior. His past was chock full of violence, and those who do have a much higher risk for violence than he did." Mary Ann Willis went through all the proper channels. She obtained a restraining order from a court in Rhode Island after she left the Myrtle Beach area and her husband. She was sitting in the legal affairs office on a military base when she was murdered. It doesn't get more blatant than that. When JJ was caught after the 15-day manhunt, members of Mary Ann's family breathed a sigh of relief. They had been living in fear that JJ would find them, and Mary Ann's son, and seek to hurt them as well. The same was true for Lorna Roselle and her boyfriend, Junior Purcell. They had been staying at a hotel while JJ was missing, because they feared retaliation from him. Roselle had been on her way to testify at Mary Ann's legal hearing when she got blocked at the gate at the base's entrance. She later learned it was because the shooting had happened and her friend had been murdered. In early June of 1993, while awaiting his court-martial, J.J. Willis escaped from a naval brig where he was being held in Charleston, South Carolina. A guard had taken a 30-minute cigarette break and left several doors in the brig unlocked. He had last been seen around 10 p.m. and was wearing a camouflage uniform issued to prisoners and tennis shoes. For 40 days, authorities searched for J.J. But on July 14, 1993, he was arrested in Fort Worth, Texas, after attempting document forgery. He had been trying to forge identification documents at a local library using the name Robert S. Thacker. When he tried to post bail, authorities figured out his real identity. He was transported back to Charleston, South Carolina. More information was revealed about JJ's plans to murder his wife and how he worked to carry it out at a court-martial hearing that was held in Sumter, South Carolina in early December of 1993. His step-aunt, Wilma Plybon, said that JJ had called her while he was in the Alcohol Rehabilitation Center in Texas, saying he wanted to rent a car, drive to Rhode Island, sneak up behind Mary Ann, and choke her to death. After he got out of the treatment center and returned to South Carolina, he bought a gun from a North Myrtle Beach pawn shop and went to an outdoor shooting range to practice. He pawned personal items to get the cash he used to rent the 3 hotel rooms and 2 getaway cars, and planned to live on the remaining money during his escape. His step-aunt had been in the Air Force Legal Affairs Office along with her husband during the shooting. They had planned to testify on Mary Ann's behalf. On the day of the murder, JJ had entered the Legal Affairs Office, where he was immediately told that he was not supposed to be there by an Air Force officer who was present. He responded, "Sir, I want to see my wife." JJ ignored the orders to leave and headed down the hall, where he found Mary Ann waiting alone in a conference room. A pathologist testified that Mary Ann had been trying to run from her husband when he fired the gun. She was shot once in the back and then on the side of her head. JJ then turned and ran back down the corridor to another office where his step-aunt and uncle were being interviewed by an Air Force prosecutor. His uncle, Terry Plybon, acted quickly and blocked the door with his foot before JJ could make it all the way in. JJ managed to squeeze one arm through and fire off a shot, which hit a plaque on the wall. He attempted to pull the trigger 3 more times, but the gun didn't fire. He exited the building after that. JJ's defense team explained he had lived through a dismal childhood in Ironton, Ohio. His mother had abandoned him at the age of 3, and he lived with his father and stepmother, who was abusive. Social services had intervened when JJ was 15, and his stepmother got drunk and fired a gun inside their home. He lived in a series of foster homes before going to live with his step-aunt, Wilma Plyben. The defense team also said JJ felt his wife and step-aunt had betrayed him by accusing him of domestic violence, and that factored into his state of mind when he planned the murder. JJ pleaded guilty to the charge of murder, and after the 2-week court-martial was given a life sentence, which he was ordered to serve at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. He would be eligible for parole in 10 years. Mary Ann's father, Eugene Mello, expressed anger that the Air Force didn't do a better job of protecting his daughter. He felt like she should have been given protection on the day she was scheduled to testify in the Legal Affairs Office. In response, the wing commander of the Myrtle Beach Air Force Base said they had followed proper procedure and couldn't have predicted what JJ was going to do. Although he did say about Mary Ann's family, "If that happened to my daughter, I'd feel bitter too. I suppose they will feel bitter for the rest of their lives." Mello also said he didn't like the way JJ's defense portrayed Mary Ann as an alcoholic and drug addict during the court-martial. He said, "My daughter was not an alcoholic. The prosecution could not put anyone on the stand that could testify to my daughter's character. Everyone who knew her loved her." The organization Citizens Against Spouse Abuse listed some warning signs and characteristics of men who may become abusers in one of the issues of the Myrtle Beach Sun-News, where the bulk of this story was reported. Now, I do want to add a caveat here that it's not just men who can become abusers. I could do a whole other episode on men who have been abused by or died at the hands of women, and I likely will in the future. But this is the way the list ran in 1993 in regards to Mary Ann Willis's murder, so I'll read it the way it was published. Characteristics: jealousy and possessiveness, violent temper, inability to handle frustration, preoccupation with weapons, poor self-image, pattern of blaming others, alcohol or drug abuse, abuse during courtship, unrealistic expectations, inability to communicate, exhibits a need to control or dictate how others should live their lives, verbal assaults as well as physical assaults, may have Jekyll and Hyde personality, tries to isolate wife, denies beatings and their severity, may come from a family where violence was practiced. As far as I can tell, Jeremy J.J. Willis is still incarcerated at Fort Leavenworth. He is now 54 years old and his release date is listed as January 26, 2061. However, I did find an article from 2022 that said J.J. had escaped the U.S. disciplinary barracks at Fort Leavenworth on April 30th, 1998. He and another inmate left the grounds in a garbage truck and were captured about an hour later, 25 miles east of Fort Leavenworth. Before we continue, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. I'm a huge fan of the skincare products by SkinxErin. You've heard me talk about them before. I use their pre-cleanse oil, hydrating beauty oil, and perfecting night oil each day, and I swear my skin looks at least 10 years younger. I love that these products don't leave my skin feeling greasy and are loaded with squalene oil and vitamins E and A. Plus, they are extremely affordable, their customer service can't be beat, and the positive affirmations they include in the packaging are so uplifting. Go ahead and treat yourself with 10% off your order using my code MissingCarolinas10. I'll include a link in the show notes for you. Are you looking to level up your writing or learn a new skill? Whether you focus on nonfiction or are more inclined to creative writing, or want to learn how to put together a digital portfolio of your writing, Wow Women on Writing can help. Interested in podcasting? Check out a digital course I created called You Can Start a Podcast. During this pre-recorded webinar, you will learn the benefits of creating your own podcast, materials you need to get started, how to develop content that will keep listeners coming back for more, and ways your podcast can create supplemental income. I'll share examples of different types of podcasts, how to decide on a format, ways to handle the technology necessary for creating a podcast, how to develop your first few episodes, promotion and monetization ideas, and ways you can repurpose your podcast content. All written materials and resources are provided by me. I'll also give you a handout with information discussed in the webinar, along with suggestions for a few different types of podcasts to explore. Best of all, this webinar only costs $30. You can find it by going to wow-womenonwriting.com and clicking on the Classroom tab. I'll also post a link in the show notes. And now, let's get back to the show. I want to talk about a woman named Dara Watson next. By all accounts, the 30-year-old had been dating her fiancé for several years, and it doesn't seem like anyone believed her life was in danger. Dara grew up in Boone, North Carolina, and her parents owned Watsonata Western World on King Street. She graduated from Appalachian State University and then worked in finance at the nearby Tweetsie Railroad attraction. She was described by her friends and family as joyful, adventurous, and an environmentalist. She had climbed part of Mount Everest, traveled to Australia to see kangaroos, and hiked the mountains of Peru. Mutual friends introduced her to a young man named David Hedrick, and they met in person for the first time at a golf tournament on Hilton Head Island in April of 2008. After a few months of dating, Dara decided to make the move to be with him in the Charleston area of South Carolina. She soon found a job working as a controller for a local company. In 2010, they moved into a stylish townhome in Mount Pleasant. They traveled together to places like Egypt, and in January 2012, Dara was excited when David proposed to her with a ring from Tiffany's on a balcony at the Biltmore Inn in Asheville. They talked of having a small ceremony in Charleston and then chartering a catamaran in Fiji. One of their friends, a real estate agent, was helping them look for a new house closer to the city. David Hedrick was from Moncks Corner and went to college on a basketball scholarship. He'd graduated from the College of Charleston with a business degree. While working at the Carolina Yacht Club, he met someone from Palmetto Surety Corporation who offered him a marketing job. The company insured bail bondsmen. David worked his way up the ranks and by 2012 was serving as Palmetto Surety's president and CEO. However, according to an article that ran in the Post and Courier on February 15, 2012, David was struggling with some issues at his job. He was worried about the finances at his company and seemed concerned he would be held personally liable for some decisions that had been made there. Dara asked a mutual friend for some attorney recommendations, and once he consulted one, he seemed relieved. The couple went to Boone on the weekend of February 4, 2012 to attend the baby shower for Dara's sister. They left that Monday and got back in time for Dara to pick up her Jack Russell Terrier from a local boarding center around 6 p.m. She went home, sent some work emails, and then ceased communication with anyone. The real estate agent friend tried to reach out to her with some listings and to see how the shower went, but didn't hear back from Dara. The next day, she failed to show up for work, prompting her boss to message her with no reply. Her boss then reached out to David, who seemed surprised Dara hadn't gone to work, but he later texted back and said he'd heard from her. Then, Dara supposedly texted from her own phone, telling her boss that she was fine and would return to work the next day. Dara's sister also received similar texts. Meanwhile, David was telling people that he and Dara were working through some things and that she'd probably gone off to stay with a friend. But when Dara missed going into work when payroll was due, that was the final straw. She'd never done anything like that before, and it was out of character. Her boss went to the local police station to report her missing on February 10th. Around the same time, David told a close friend that Dara had called off the wedding and was breaking up with him. His friend was concerned because David had been engaged before, and when that relationship had ended, he hadn't taken the breakup well. In fact, he told friends that he never wanted to get married again after that experience. When the friend found out Dara's boss had filed a missing persons report, he called David and told him that the matter was serious. He questioned why David hadn't filed the report. David replied with, "I guess they gotta do what they gotta do." The friend called another acquaintance, and they headed over to David's house to do a welfare check. As they were walking up the front steps, they heard a gunshot. They broke a window to get into the house and discovered David Hedrick had shot himself in the head, killing himself. He was in the master bedroom. He didn't leave behind a note about Dara, but there was a resignation letter to his employer. His car in the garage was full of his belongings and financial records and checkbooks, like he had been planning to leave town. Investigators soon learned that Dara's vehicle, a silver GMC Envoy, had been discovered burned out in the Francis Marion National Forest on February 7th. witnesses had seen a man matching David's description walking out of the forest with a shovel. They found Dara's cell phone in a retention pond near the townhouse they had shared. It appeared David had been sending messages from her phone pretending to be Dara after she went missing. When the police went back to the National Forest on February 17th, they located Dara's body in a shallow grave about 60 yards from where the SUV had been found. She had died of a gunshot wound to the head. Dara's close friends didn't believe David's story that she had ended their relationship. She had been shopping for a wedding dress just days before she went missing and showed no signs of her relationship being in trouble. No one will ever know what happened on the night Dara died, other than her life was taken by the person she trusted the most. To close out this episode, I found some helpful information on how to be a better ally to those experiencing this type of abuse on the website for the Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence for the state of New York. Number 1, initiate conversation. Talk with them privately about the abuse. Don't force them, and let them know it is safe to talk to you. Number 2, believe them. Many victims fear not being believed. Express that you hear them and believe what they're telling you. Number 3, listen without judgment. Survivors can feel shame for what's happened. Don't judge them for their past experiences or decisions. Number 4, validate their experience. Survivors want to be heard. Practice active listening skills and validate what they are telling you. Number 5, ask how they want to be supported. Be sure to ask them what they want and need. Don't impose your thoughts and feelings on them. Number 6, build on their strengths. Survivors are strong. Point out the ways in which they have adapted to solve problems, develop courage, and stay determined. Number 7, support their decision. Show support for the decisions a survivor makes. They know their relationship best and the risks they feel comfortable taking. Number 8, give them control. Give survivors control and don't dictate what they should do. Empower them to make their own decisions. Number 9, take it seriously. Domestic violence can be deadly. Always take it seriously and follow these steps when helping a survivor. This brings us to the conclusion of this episode of Missing in the Carolinas. If you enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and give it a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you'd also like to support the show in a small way, you can buy me a coffee over at buymeacoffee.com, Renee Robertson. I currently don't receive any compensation for this podcast, so every little bit helps me continue producing new content. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, so please like our pages and get started on a discussion of the missing people profiled on the show. Do you know of a missing persons case in North or South Carolina that you think should be covered? Email me at missinginthecarolinas@gmail.com with any details you can share. And don't forget to check out our sponsor, Wow Women on Writing, and the great programs and writing contests they have there at wow-womenonwriting.com. Cover art for this podcast was designed by Macintosh Multimedia. All episodes are researched and written by me, Renee Robertson, with sound editing provided by Daniel Robertson. Thanks so much for listening.